CS 2023 is amending Chapter 9, Article 4, Part 1, ROA 1994, the Police Oversight Ordinance. I move a do pass. And I would like to move the amendments, although I think we're going to have a discussion about them. They're really moving them for the purpose of discussion. Councilor Winter, I defer to you because I think our intention was maybe to have the councilors discuss them tonight, but maybe not move the amendments yet.
Madam President, Councilor Benton, that's correct. I did talk to a couple of the groups, and although we can do that, I told them that we would just have some discussion, but would save the vote till the next meeting. All
right, so I withdraw that motion of moving the amendments, Madam Chair and Madam President, excuse me. So if maybe we could go back and forth on these, but talk about briefly each of these amendments. These have been brought forward by the stakeholders, and I agreed to sponsor them on their behalf, and I know that Councilor Sanchez has a couple of amendments as well that he can speak to. But the committee amendment listed as number A in the packet is on page 2, to allow stricken language to remain and remove the following underlying language. The CPOA is accountable to but independent from the mayor, the city's attorney office, and the city council and APD, the CPOA, etc. This amendment is proposed by APD forward, and if approved, this section would remain unchanged from the current language and would continue to read as follows. There is hereby created a CPOA as an independent agency of city government, not part of either the city administration or city council, that it consists of a police oversight board and an administrative office led by the CPOA executive director. And the intention of this is keeping the accountable but independent language was very important to the advocates, and also would make the ordinance more consistent with the CASA agreement. As written, it tracks verbatim from the CASA and is consistent with that language. The amendment B, on page 8, line 3, insert the following language. APD shall provide POB members, the director, and CPOA staff with reasonable access to APD premises, files, documents, reports, data, including APD raw data, and other materials that are reasonably necessary for this purpose. This amendment is intended to clarify that APD is required to allow the CPOA access to its data, including raw data. This amendment was requested by APD Forward with the intention to help clarify the CPOA's ability to access APD raw data. Councilor Winter, you want me to keep rolling, or okay? The amendment labeled C is on page 8, line 9. Insert the following language before the period. And to recommendations by recognized research and policy development groups, forums, consortiums, or similar. And the explanation of this is the existing language of committee substitute number 2 recognizes that in making policy recommendations, the POB or the board, we're trying to get used to calling them the board, should be able to draw from a number of sources in recommending policy changes for APD, including from police best practices that have been used by other departments. And this amendment was also recommended by APD Forward with the intention to expand the definition of what constitutes police best practices from just those practices that other police departments have found effective to also include recommendations from policy research groups. With this change, the full definition of police best practices would include that language. The amendment labeled number D states delete subsections 2, 3, and 4 on page 13, line 20 through, line 30 through page 14, line 8, and delete subsections 6 and 7 of page 14, line 12 through 33. Insert the following in place thereof. Prior to seeking a subpoena, the executive director must make a reasonable attempt to exhaust all other avenues for obtaining the information sought. Subpoenas shall be served in a manner that complies with all requirements for administrative subpoenas under New Mexico law. And APD Forward again suggested this change, suggesting that the subpoena language found in the subsections we mentioned is too cumbersome and intrudes too greatly upon the POB's ability to set internal procedures for itself. APD Forward recommends the above changes in lieu of these sections, which deal with notice to various individuals within the city about the need for information. The amendment labeled E. On page 13, line 29, add a comma after the word complaints. And this is one we had an interesting meeting about, and the value of a comma, a well-placed comma, is remarkable sometimes. So paragraph 283 of the CASA requires the city to grant the CPOA subpoena authority to carry out its functions. In applying this requirement, the CASA CS2 proposes to limit the scope of subpoena authority to the review of civilian police complaints and audits of police use of force, linchpins of the CPOA's purpose and function. But APD Forward identified that as written without the comma, this provision appears to limit the CPOA's subpoena authority to only those CPC reviews or audits where an improper use of force is alleged. This minor change would clarify that the CPOA could apply its subpoena authority as it relates to any subject matter, not just use of force, such as an example, something like profiling or illegal searches, if they were relevant in the context of a complaint. So with this amendment, the sentence would read, the CPOA is authorized to issue subpoenas only as necessary to investigate civilian complaints, comma, or to audit and monitor incidences of use of force by the police. The amendment labeled E states, delete the following language on page 19, line 32 through page 20. Line 1, a copy of these performance evaluations shall be delivered to the chief of police, the mayor, and the president of the city council for receipt by the council. Explanation, APD Forward recommends the POB should not be required to share its annual performance evaluation of its executive director with the mayor, the chief of police, or the city council. However, the purpose of this provision within the CS2 was to implement the CASA requirement that the CPOA POB remain accountable to the mayor, just like the annual reports from the CPOA help promote general oversight and accountability. The amendment labeled G inserts the following on page 10, line 9 after the period. The City Council shall report out its progress on filling CPOA board vacancies on a quarterly basis. And this was recommended that, again, our staff, this doesn't mean the council itself, we keep an arm's length from these board vacancies, and the staff works to fill them, but the staff will report its progress on filling vacancies. And I think this was would keep our process transparent to the public as to whether we're moving forward with expeditiously filling these vacancies. Just a couple more, I think, here. The one labeled H on page 3, line 12, insert the following between the words housed and in, and the board shall hold its meetings. With this amendment, the full sentence would read, the CPOA shall be housed and the board shall hold its meetings in a facility that is separate from any police presence and is located outside the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Government Center, the police department, and or all of the police substations. This amendment would require that the POB meetings be held outside of City Hall. I'm putting this forward at the request of APD Forward.
Madam President,
I'm not
Councilor
quite
Benton,
convinced myself yet about this.
Let me clarify that this is actually an amendment that was sponsored by Councilor Gibson.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I think you
should
got on
have
a roll
let
there.
Councilor Gibson do this.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh, but you
Please.
were doing so well.
I know, I was
Gave
on a roll there,
Albuquerque
but
Forward
I'm ready
the
to
credit
stop.
for it, too. So I'll give him the credit for it. So I'm not going to reread it, but yeah, the explanation, the intent is that the CPOA be housed and the board shall hold its meetings in a facility away from the government center. And this amendment would require that POB meetings be held outside of City Hall. The ordinance already requires that CPOA offices be housed outside of City Hall, a measure that's intended to help promote the agency's appearance of independence. Having the meetings outside the City Hall may go further in promoting independence in fact and in appearance. And I think these past several months indicate a need for delineation of more independence from the council, between the council and the board. And, I've got one more. Okay. This is committee amendment marked I on page 20, line 24. Insert the following after the period. In addition to the findings and recommendations, each investigation report shall, at a minimum, also include 1, a section outlining any relevant background and facts relating to the matter, 2, a listing of any relevant policies, procedures, or practices that are at issue, and 3, an analysis of the issues in the case. And the explanation for this is that this amendment will help ensure the board members have relevant information and analysis presented to them in board material to help guide their review and consideration. At present, it appears that board members do not get much written analysis or information about the cases they are considering unless they independently review the investigation file. Additional helpful information can be useful to help focus a decision maker's analysis and can help build comfort with their ultimate decision. And
thank you, Councillor Jones, for J.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is item J, on page 3, line 7, add the following language after the period. Board members shall rely on the CPOA professional investigative staff to perform the investigations called for under this ordinance and shall not independently investigate any matters before the board. This amendment reemphasizes that the CPOA board shall not be doing its own investigations and shall use professional staff.
Thank you. K, Councillor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, this amendment will not conflict with the CASA, which requires only that the city shall provide the agency a dedicated budget and grant the agency the authority to administer its budget in compliance with the state and local laws. And basically what it does in the current language, it states that the CPOA shall have a dedicated and independent source of funding equal to, and it's 0.5% of the total budget. Basically, that 0.5% would go away. And I personally feel because of the cost of the APD budget and the cost how it's risen so dramatically, bringing in more officers, that the CPOA should come into the budget process like every other department within the city of Albuquerque and request the money that they need to operate their department.
Councillor Sanchez, Al.
Okay, I think I've got the last amendment, and basically that would say that the director will be a full-time at-will city employee, directly responsible only to the board, to be selected, removed, or reviewed as follows. So basically the board would have that authority, and the director would be an at-will employee.
So is there any discussion on any of these proposed amendments? No? Any comments from the administration? Oh, Councillor Winter.
Thank you, Madam President. No discussion, but I want the public to know that these will be put online, and if you all would let us know how they can find these amendments online.
Councillor Davis, followed by Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President, and I appreciate the sponsors. I just might ask our staff, Mr. Melendres, perhaps on proposed amendment B regarding the language about providing POB members, the director, and staff with reasonable access to APD files, reports, and data, et cetera. Would you just conduct an analysis for us of whether it's necessary to list the individuals or to better just say the CPOA so it's clear whether individual members can make those individual requests or whether that's a more formal action of the organization or the board?
Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Davis will look into that and have a discussion ready for you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
And I want to add, with respect to Councilor Winter's request, those will be posted on the city's legislative portal through the Legistar system on the city's webpage. If you go to the City Council webpage and access City Council and go to legislation, you'll be able to access those amendments.
Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. And just to clarify, I think I may have misstated one of the amendments, but the one having to do with the performance evaluations of the director was F and not E, so I wanted to make that clear. And I also wanted to thank Mr. Melendres for working so hard on this. I mean, we had some really good discussions with the stakeholders, and these will continue. And we'll see how we do on Thursday night and whether we're ready to move forward or not.
Thank you. Before we go to close, is there anyone signed up to speak? No? No?
Madam President, just one more thing. Now, this is a special meeting, and we invite all neighborhood folks, all groups, anybody that wants to give some last final input on this, to please come down. I think we're really trying to make sure, since this is probably one of the most important ordinances the city has, that everybody has a chance to comment.
Thank you. I guess with that, I don't know if we should hear from Mr. Melendres and just have kind of a conversation. I know there was some question in terms of public input. If you could kind of give a series of events, I know that this board, the council really feels that we've provided those opportunities throughout, but Councilor Winter and Councilor Benton really felt that it was important to have one last opportunity to really engage the community. So as it was stated earlier, we really encourage lots of folks to come out Thursday and give their input. We do appreciate all the input we've received so far, but if you would kind of give us a timeline.
Sure, Madam President. This particular process has been very public relative to many council processes, just in terms of the length and the number of meetings that have been dedicated to its discussion. The bill that's before you now in its second committee substitute version was first introduced by this council back in the summer of 2018. From that time, it's made several appearances before the city's Finance and Government Operations Committee, where it was substituted twice based on stakeholder and community feedback. The City Council has also dedicated 2 study sessions to date to discuss this matter. And with respect to this bill finally coming to Council, this is its second appearance at Council where folks have had the ability to sign up and comment on the bill. The Council is now scheduling another special City Council meeting for this Thursday evening, specifically dedicated to hear from the public, community members, neighborhood organizations that may have specific input with respect to this process. The stakeholders, including the Department of Justice, the Civilian Police Oversight Agency itself, APD Forward, the Albuquerque Police Officers Association, and APD have all provided comment and input so far, and the council will be available to continue hearing that before it finally votes on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Melendres. Thank you, Mr. Melendres. So I will turn it over to Councilor Benton or Winter to close. To defer, sorry.
I'll move the deferral until our special meeting on Thursday.
There's a motion and second for deferral to March 21st special council meeting. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.